How was it that in 2019, you almost were in a position where you guys were going to fold the business?
2019, we needed to raise money and we needed to raise it quick. I had to learn the hard way that my mentality was holding us back. Social media is what other people say about you. I do not care about what we're putting on our company pages. I care about it feels so fundamental to the future of humanity, which sounds a bit scary saying that. Hopefully one day you'll achieve the magical exit and everyone will get their money and go off laughing into the sunset.
Don't Work Harder is the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to catapult their business forward, because we believe it's not about working longer, harder, or smarter. It's about those braver moments. One bold move is worth 1,000 small steps. So rather than those small incremental movements that are moving you forward at a much slower pace, we're going to share with you the stories of successful entrepreneurs who've taken those big, bold steps to move them forward. This show is brought to you by Atomic, and I'm your host, Simon Randauer, and I'm here not only to share with you the stories of entrepreneurs and the success that they've had, but you'll also walk away with the insights of what they did at that exact moment when they made that change that moved their business forward. Today, we'll be joined by Andy Lambert. Andy Lambert is a serial entrepreneur and a bit of a tech expert, and he'll be speaking to us about his journey from founding a business with two others where he launched ContentCal to then selling the business to Adobe in late 2021. Now, if there was ever an episode that I would recommend that you watch or listen to, it would be this one. Andy literally took us through step by step what happened from getting his very first customer all the way through to how his business scaled to 30,000 customers, got millions of pounds worth of investment, and got sold. Andy, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a really interesting conversation ahead of us, I know. And one of the things that you've said to me when we were kind of getting ready for this is that it's been a dream. The past few years, when you talk about kind of founding, scaling a business to obviously being bought by Adobe, you said to me, it has been a dream. So take me back, because if Adobe bought ContentCal, which we'll speak about a little bit later, late December 2021, how was it that in 2019, you almost were in a position where you guys were going to fold the business? Take me back. What was happening in that moment for you in 2019?
It was a strange moment, it's fair to say, because by all measures, the business was doing well. All of our marketing metrics were looking good. Finally, we'd got to product market fit. And we had just closed in the month prior to December 19, a deal with United Nations. So it was our biggest deal and showed that we really had arrived, right? We are now kicking out the biggest incumbent in the space. We were going after Hootsuite. Hootsuite are a company that have been up for sale for a while for about $700 million, right? So they're a big business. They had the first mover advantage and stuff. So, and we thought we were making it. But one of the challenges of when you're landing bigger deals is that they take a long time to pay you. And that really started to hurt cash flow, because top of funnel looked good, and that is a challenge when you're building SaaS businesses. They are expensive to run, and rather than thinking about profitability from a typical business standpoint, you're thinking about burn rate. You're thinking about the runway that you have, which is how many months of cash you have left in the bank before you're insolvent, basically. And by December 2019, it was looking kind of bad. We'd raised money. We knew we needed to raise again. When you're on that kind of journey, you're not focusing on profitability. When you're a funded business like this, you're focused on very rapid growth with the view that hopefully one day you'll achieve the magical exit and everyone will get their money and go off laughing into the sunset. That was always the objective. And that objective looked like it was falling off the rails in December 2019. We needed to raise money and we needed to raise it quick.
Right.
We managed to pull a Hail Mary, as I think you might call it, where some last minute investors came in and saved us. Not all of the terms were amazing. I won't disclose all of them, but it meant taking money fairly quickly, but we raised an extra £1 million of investment to keep us going. We knew we could probably raise additional investment because, like I said, the fundamentals of the business was still really good. Top of funnel was incredible. Inbound volume was wonderful, about 1,000 new leads per month, of which we had probably about if I remember rightly, a 20% conversion rate of those. So it was all looking strong. It really was a case of cash in the bank is running out. So our investors came to the rescue on that, with some dubious terms, but we took it, we had to. And that then led us into the beginning of 2020, which, I really recount so many moments where luck and timing, right? People say you make your own luck. I feel incredibly fortunate because we closed that fundraise at the beginning of 2020. You know what happened next, right? From March, it would have been much harder to raise that because everyone was, in March 2020, everyone was looking around wondering what on earth is going to happen to our economy. Fortunately, from our point of view, in a tech business and a business that had been built to allow remote teams to build content strategies together, the timing was incredibly fortuitous. As the world locked down, our volumes only grew, bolstered by this additional investment. From 2020, we just experienced unbelievable growth, which is both driven by the economic climate that we found ourselves in. Again, a heavy dose of good fortune for us, despite the horrendous situation that was happening to our broader society. But there was also one other key component to what changed our fortunes around, is that I had to learn the hard way that my mentality was holding us back. And my mentality at that time was, let's see how much I can do, right? I've always been a grafter, probably very similar to you.
Yeah.
Hard work. I have a great deal of faith in my own capabilities to a fault, whereby I feel that I can figure this out. I don't need to hire people because I can do this. I'll figure it out. And I've always had that kind of like slightly savior mentality, which is unhealthy and unhelpful in some circumstances.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because certainly in some circumstances, you can feel like you're that valued individual who everybody can rely on. And particularly, I guess, where you've got employees, but you at this stage are a business that is going through a huge transition. You've just saved yourself with this cash flow of investment. So this is interesting. So you're thinking, how much can I do? Like, let's keep going. Now is the time to do it. I think this will be familiar to a lot of people. And what happened?
As one of the founders, I'd always seen it say, I need to spearhead growth. I need to be in all the customer meetings. I need to win the big deals.
Yeah.
It's making me sound incredibly egotistical, but honesty. And you realize you just can't scale in that way. And I had to figure out better ways that I could leverage my own capabilities. I love being in front of customers. I have deep understanding of social media strategy, etc. So I spend a lot of time like consulting with customers, but you don't need that in every single sales situation. Sometimes you just need a closer, right? So on that basis, we started to hire seasoned sales folk. We built our sales function throughout the course of 2020 rapidly.
We're going to take a short pause to hear from one of our sponsors. Sponsors help us make the best show possible. Don't Work Harder is sponsored by Constant Contact, the digital marketing platform built with small business owners in mind. With Constant Contact, you can grow your contacts list, send out more emails, organise social media and events, and simply get more done with their advanced automation tools. It's everything you need to grow your business, advance your automation, and attract more of the right customers all in one place. Visit constantcontact.com to get started. So up until this point then, Andy, so, I was kind of saying in the introduction that you guys, by the end, had 60 employees. Yeah. So am I picking up from this that actually pre-2020, there was the founding team, and was that pretty much it? And
I'd hired a few sales focus. I had 2 salespeople reporting to me, and we had a couple of marketers as well, but sub 10. Yeah, it was sub 10. So it is all 2020 and beyond. We rapidly expanded the business. Obviously 60 employees won't sound massive to some businesses, but percentile wise, it was rapid growth in a very short period of time.
And I think it's really interesting because obviously so many of, our viewers, our listeners are going to be solopreneurs or people in small businesses. And it's weighing up having total autonomy and having other people to share that responsibility with you. So in terms of kind of working with the founders, what was it that they spotted and how did they communicate it to you that we need to work in a different way? Can you kind of remember how that was done? Because it feels like it was quite significant.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
So I've always had this thing where I really want to recruit people from a background where they haven't been given a chance.
Right.
And I want to see this trait of coachability in them.
Okay.
So I had hired junior folk to begin with that I thought felt really malleable, coachable, that kind of thing. And that was my notion where I'd be like, okay, I bring people in. Of course, it's also cost effective too, but I think I could put a lot of my time in coaching them, help them to develop into the salespeople that they all want to be. But I got that wrong, if I'm honest. And these sales folk generally, with the exception of one, didn't really turn into the revenue generators.
So it was the results that were speaking for themselves.
Correct.
It's so difficult because you're waiting, aren't you? You're waiting for that moment where they become up and coming. They hit that goal that you think they can achieve.
Exactly. And again, whilst this was a kind of romantic notion and with the best intention, I'm just thinking too small. And my CEO and our board would continually coach me on just think bigger. What could it be? What could it be? Right. So, and that's when I was like, okay, fine. We do need to look for more senior sales hires. So that's why we hired someone that has had, proven background in doing this from the recruitment industry. So, understands rejection and just going for it. Right. So, so we hired him to be head of sales, and then we recruited a bunch of sales folk beneath them, all with seasoned capabilities. Yes, they were much more expensive, different plane.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's going to cut into your profit.
Exactly. But again, we were all about, cash burn. And that's, again, the mindset shift of here we're a small business and we're trying to do things on the cheap to try and punch above our weight, both financially and competency wise. But then you realize that actually, no, I needed to totally shift my mindset into our ambition is to be $1 billion business. So shift that. And, our CEO used to say right now we're a $0 billion business, and that kind of hits hard because right from day one, you're like, okay, our ambition is big.
And that was it. So from day one, you guys knew the intention of this business it wasn't just that you guys launched it. It wasn't just that you were scaling. It was with the intention to sell.
Correct. Right. Exactly.
So from day one, you guys knew that. Okay.
And when you raise money, that is the contract.
Of course.
Making,
yeah.
Right. So day one, it was that, but I did not fully internalize because this is my first proper founding team startup. I've done a startup before in a slightly different capacity. This was the first proper go at this, where creating everything from scratch. And my mindset was a little too kind of hustle and grind culture, try and just get it done, of which is great in the first couple of years to product market fit. And that kind of, my competencies there were exactly what the business needed. But then my mindset started to become a limiting factor when we're a few years into the journey. We've got product.
I've literally got light bulbs going off in my head. This is so interesting. And this is really reminding me of a conversation I had with Ryan Dias. And he speaks about don't hire cheap. He speaks about invest in the hiring. And obviously, that's, as we know, he bought and scaled businesses. That's what he does, and even more so now. But the other thing he said to me that was really interesting, and I wonder if this resonates, is he said, when you do get an expensive hire, you're on a payment plan. You don't pay them all in one go. They're getting their salary monthly. And actually by then, they've more than paid for themselves. And it feels like that's almost like what your light bulb moment was, your big domino that you guys knocked down, then started to see a big shift, was actually employing senior people.
Correct. Yeah. Having the right people to do the jobs, because the hardest thing of starting a business and then scaling it and getting it into that level of maturity, you get to that that uncomfortable position where very quickly the business evolves beyond the capabilities of individuals. And I had to have that conversation with myself as director of growth, where I'm like, has this gone beyond my capabilities? Like,
Wow.
am I still the right person to do this? And in some instances, and there's some of the things I was involved in, like, no, actually, I need to have other people to do this.
That's a huge amount of self-awareness would be needed.
Yeah, it's incredibly uncomfortable as well, because you're constantly reinventing yourself or figuring out, like, you know, your existential crisis of like,
Yeah.
not even needed here. I've got it to this stage. Like, where do we go? And you can either take, you know, dig your heels in and be like, no, this is the way it's always been. No, we've done it this way. Or you go, well, I've hired you and I haven't hired you to tell me what to do, or for me to tell you what to do. We've hired you so you tell me what to do.
How long did that change take you, do you think?
Well, I mean, it was ongoing from the beginning of 2020, as I said.
Yeah.
Sales were the first function that we properly formalized,
Yeah.
And started hiring for. And then we applied the same rigor to both marketing and engineering functions as well as customer success, basically across the whole business.
Yeah.
And that's what accelerated that from 10 employees through to when we sold about 60 employees over the course of about 18 months.
Right.
I would say.
Okay.
So rapid growth at that period. And
A stretchy time by the sounds of it for you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we were hiring so fast that we even hired like an in-house recruiter. So we didn't hire the recruiter, but we contracted a recruitment company to be an in-house recruiter and just be like,
wow,
you are doing all of this, because there's no chance any of us who work in the business could be looking at that volume of CVs. It just kills our time. So we invested hard in the whole hiring component of it too. And of course, to attract good talent, we rebranded the business. We changed all of our visual identity, worked with a branding consultancy to really refine all of that, because essentially our visual identity to that point had been like, oh yeah, that logo will do. Let's go. You know, and
it's almost still had that kind of early startup mentality.
Exactly.
Well, I guess you guys were operating at a much higher level, but as you were saying, like the visual identity wasn't quite a match for the rooms that you wanted to step into.
That is exactly it.
Right.
Perfectly articulated. So, and when you've got all of those moving parts, you've got hiring and a degree of firing, because not all of it's working out, it's fair to say. You've got changing visual identity, you've got a growing product. So it becomes an incredibly messy time, multiple spinning plates. It's articulated and written about in a book that was written by Scott Belsky called The Messy Middle.
Okay.
And it is a perfect articulation of when you get into this period where, you know, you've got past the startup phase. You've built a business that works, right? People want it. Demand is there. Demand is growing. And you've got a way to capture that demand. Perfect. Step one, complete. Step two is like, okay, now it's time to scale that demand. So now, even though we would call ourselves a startup, it's a misnomer. We're a scale up. At that point in 2020, we've got the funding to grow the business. The limiting factor is our own capabilities and our own resource that allows us to capture the value that exists in the market. So how do we go and capture that? Which is, one, make sure we hire the best quality people that we can afford, make sure that they are inspired to go on our journey. So then we've got a good structure to retain those folk as well, which is hard. So, you know, you've got development plans to think about. And all of that, you know, you're building the plane as you're flying it, right? So not all of that we got right, and every business will probably make some form of mistake along there. Generally, we had a very, very good core employee set that, you know, there was some natural churn, but those fundamental core employees stayed with us on the journey because they recognized that. Had to do loads related to culture. There were lots of offsites, lots of like meetups, like really as soon as like the doors opened a little bit after COVID, we're all in the office. So we got a new office space. We're all in there, all in person. And to be honest, I mean, I'm going to sound a bit of a Luddite talking about this. I think that's something that many businesses desperately miss now.
It's such an important topic. Yeah, it's quite a controversial topic, but I'm hearing the leaders and the founders are all saying what you're saying, and I'd love to explore this a bit more. but a lot of employees are the ones that are like, we've got so used to this flexibility. From a growing business point of view, so at that point, ContentCal had not been sold quite yet.
Nope.
What did you have to do to incentivize people to believe that coming in at a time when we'd suddenly got used to this brand new way of living and working, and it was living and working, being able to be home for your parcel man or woman. How do you incentivize people to come in?
To be honest, it's kind of route one, first principle stuff. Lots of parties.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would have like good quality parties after, because we had a place in Soho. So our office was very counter typical tech land.
Yeah.
We've always been in East London, but we moved west into Soho.
Okay.
And we thought actually that's a better cultural vibe. So there's always loads of good stuff happening. So placing our office in the center of, some exciting stuff, loads of stuff to do there. This was also this wasn't driven by me either, because at this point we'd also hired an MD to look after the operations of the business. I think this was a really important step as well, because we needed a grown up in the room.
Yeah.
Right? We are all early 30s, even younger in the CEO's case, first time founders, right? We've made this up as we've gone along, and by hook or by crook, we've figured it out, and we've got a business that's rocking and rolling. But there are numerous decisions related to, that messy middle, the scaling, the hiring and firing, etc. So yeah, we were the three amigos, and now hiring someone into that mix, I was curious about how that will change the dynamic of the business. And again, I couldn't see what I couldn't see, right? I didn't know what we were missing.
Yeah, you didn't know any different.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what you don't know. And where a CEO has been amazing, just pushing me to think differently and think bigger, etc. You've also never really arrived in business. Whenever you feel like get a milestone, you go, oh, I'll be happy when. Just FYI, that never happens.
And it doesn't change.
Doesn't change.
Okay,
Even
good.
when you sell your business for 9 figures, doesn't change. You're always like, what's next? Anyway.
I said very early on that one of the quotes that I've read is that, you are a believer that it's about the graft. And obviously the name of our podcast is Don't Work Harder. However, that's not because we don't believe you should work hard. I think what you've showcased that I'd love to speak about a little bit is it is about hard work, but actually more than that, it's about those big, bold, brave moments, the moments where you knock something down and everything fundamentally changes. So I feel like I've got a really good idea of how you had to shift your thinking within a founding company, make those expensive hires, be willing to invest it. I thought that was really interesting about branding and culture. How did you know, or when did you know that you were through the messy middle?
If I'm honest, we never got through it because...
Okay. So that moment didn't come where it's we're there.
No, the moment did not come. And maybe whatever the next venture will be, maybe I'll figure it out. But quite frankly, we were acquired at a stage whereby we were in that messy middle, but rapidly scaling. So the rapid scaling of both our products, our revenues, our team, all of that. So I expect that phase would have lasted much longer, to be honest.
Okay.
Because there are so many things that would continue to move. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said, yeah, and it all resolved it through this one thing. Fortunately, Adobe came along and resolved it for us. So...
Do you know, so what I think would be really interesting to ask is I would love to know about your customer base, because it sounds like the one thing that was consistent here is that the business was growing. You're acquiring more and more customers. What was it that you guys did to get noticed by customers? What was effective for you?
There was one customer that existed in notionally in the pilot of what was to become ContentCal, and it was Alex's former employer, and they were Sky, right? So at that point, Alex had got people really excited, investors really excited that, oh, right, we can sell to enterprises like Sky and, we're going to make gazillions out of this because, our first customer is one of the world's
It's
biggest media
huge,
brands. And that then started the journey of having to reset investors' expectations, because your first customer doesn't, just because it was a friendly, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be your customer moving forward. And when you're thinking about how you acquire your customers and what your ICP is, this is when, fortunately, my understanding of sales and having been in sales for a long time, reset the expectations and go, okay, it's clear that they are giving you good favor to say that they will pilot this, etc., and be part of it. So Sky is, sorry to say it, is not our customer, right? That is an unfair representation.
Right.
So our customer is a little bit different. So on that point, I went into the journey of, I read a very important book at this time, which is called The Startup Owner's Manual. Does what it says on the tin.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Sounds like the Dummy's Guide too, or a little bit more sophisticated.
It's a chunky book.
Okay.
But it is the thing that I've referenced numerous times.
Okay, brilliant recommendation. Yeah.
Definitely. It's not lightweight reading.
Okay.
But in one of the first chapters, they have a process called the customer development process.
Okay.
Which is a very logical way of approaching, a more scientific way of approaching, how do we discover who our ICP is?
Yeah.
Is that something that we can scale? And at its core, it's fairly straightforward. So I kind of flipped around from our initial focus, and I did like the cardinal sin of when I first joined the business, got all excited that Sky was, our potential pilot customer. And I just started shooting LinkedIn DM after DM to similar people like Sky, other big businesses.
So direct outreach
and trying to book calls.
Okay.
And of course, fortunately, I got a lot of those calls, and then I could close none of them. And they could not close any of them because they were like, you're missing this, this, and this. Your product's not as good as Hootsuite. We use Hootsuite. Why would?
Because that's the thing. I mean, I think that's worth saying. And actually, I want to continue with that shortly. But it was a very crowded marketplace. Yes. It still is. Okay, yeah. So you're there. You've got one huge customer. People are willing to speak to you, but then you don't have the first mover advantage.
Yeah, don't have the first mover advantage. We have one differentiating vector, which is our calendar is really nice, like drag and drop, really intuitive. Seems like nothing now, but Hootsuite didn't have that. And social media folk are very visual, right? They want to see it all mapped out in a calendar. So people loved it.
Yeah.
But underneath that, the product was bare bones because it's early stage, right? They were like, where's your analytics? Where's your community management? How can I tag people? Can I do this on Instagram? And I'm like, no, sorry, it's all coming. They're like, well, Andy, I like your concept, but
you're a nice guy.
Yeah, exactly. Give me a call next year. Right, fine. So I'm like, I'm seeing this again and again. So I need to rethink what's going on here, because very quickly we've got into something whereby we don't have any sense of scale or traction here. We have our first customer, but what we haven't noticed is that the unfair bias that they've given us. So this is where really forcing yourself to think deeply about, okay, who is my ideal customer? So I flipped it on its head, whereby I then started to go after different segments and started to segment what it's a big market you could go after. That's the blessing of social media management. Everyone needs social media. So I then started to look at it systematically, industry by industry, and applying this customer development program. And that essentially means that rather than trying to sell to someone like you and shoot you a LinkedIn DM and say, someone, I've got a wonderful product for you, I'd love to show it to you, to a point where I'm building something that I have a feeling would be really interesting for someone like yourself. However, I'm not entirely sure, and I'd love your expertise, given that, your expertise in X, Y, Z. You're open to having a coffee and just giving your feedback on it. Flips it on its head.
Interesting.
And then suddenly the sales combo has gone into one where I'm sat side by side with you going, here's what we're building. Two wonderful things happen through that. One, you get all of this glorious, rich insight, which I just then put into a master.
Valuable feedback, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And all those things, you're just learning so much. It's a rapid period of learning. So this is all the first year, it's just drenching myself in this kind of analysis. 8 customer meetings a day in person, sitting with people, and then going through all of this. So one, all of that learning and that goodness. And two, the interesting thing happens when you don't sell to someone, they want to buy more from you.
Yeah.
it's just that notion, because when you don't push, others pull.
Of course.
So it starts to make it go.
The energy balance is completely different, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Where people suddenly start to, when they're getting their feedback, they start, when you give them space to talk, because sales conversations are often completely incorrect, where the salesperson is doing 80% of the chatting and the prospect is doing 20.
It's meant to be the other way.
Yeah. So if you frame it the other way, then suddenly people start to talk themselves into it. Oh, I could use it for this, this, and this. Oh, do you think it works there? And you're like, type. And you've got to be very delicate. You're not like trying to close a deal then, but that method, whilst that isn't the primary goal, it is a wonderful secondary, a side order effect, if you will. So all of that ends up getting in this big Google Doc where I'm starting to understand what these buying signals are. And the way that I got to a point where I thought we had product market fit. We talk lots about product market fit, and it's kind of like a esoteric term. You don't really know what it actually means. And what it meant for me, and at least in my mental model, is like product market fit is the point where I could say to you and anyone else that was very similar to you in a similar kind of persona or ICP, where I say the same thing at the same time and you nod at the same point.
Right. Okay.
So it then got to a point where it turned out that agencies, so particularly like small to mid-sized agencies, absolutely loved what we did. They actually didn't care about the analytics piece because they had other tools for doing that anyway, because they spent deeply on that. But what they didn't have was a way for them to collaborate with their clients and get feedback on all of their content plans that they were creating for their clients. Seems pretty straightforward now, but they were doing it all on Google Docs or Notion. And from a product standpoint, when you find a market where people have found their own kind of homebrewed ways of solving their own problem, you're onto something, because people care enough about a problem that they've tried to fix it themselves.
Sure.
So I only knew this just by like sitting with enough agency founders that are like, it is an absolute nightmare trying to get feedback from clients on our content plans. It takes us far too long.
Yeah.
It costs us deals with our clients, and ultimately impacts our relationship. Well, what would the ideal look like for you? And then like, well, all of these things. So all of that becomes like, wonderful depth of information for future product iterations. And it also meant that I'd found our minimum viable audience. I've stolen this term from Seth Godin. But like, I believe that's down to my core, that the minimum viable audience, the smallest possible audience that will sustain your near-term growth, is the way to get a business going. It is the way of the spark that ignites the fire that will become your business in future.
Break that down into kind of everyday language for me. So cool. What does that mean exactly?
Cool. So that minimum viable audience is the smallest possible audience that you can address today that will allow you to achieve a certain degree of growth.
Okay.
It won't be your ICP forever. And this is where a lot of businesses go wrong, and they think that this is what's going to be the future in perpetuity. Yes, we want to land a sky in future. Yes, we ended up landing UN in the fullness of the journey, but we're not there yet.
Right.
So don't pretend that we're there yet. There are segments that we can pick.
I was going to say, sounds like stepping stones.
Stepping stones.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Exactly. So that was smaller agencies to begin with, because they loved our product. And again, in every single meeting, I would go, yeah, isn't it a nightmare that we end up having to like create another Google Sheet, send it to a client, wait for them to send it back. By that time, we've missed the opportunity for when that social post should have gone out. And everyone goes, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, just waiting on the feedback. So how long was that process? So from joining them and potentially investors thinking we're just going to get loads of businesses like Sky, you getting in and realizing that actually that's not comparable, because there was, they had a loyalty in a different way, because as you described them, they were already friends of the founder or friends of the agency as they existed. How long did it take for you to recognize our current audience that is going to get us started is not the big companies we're initially going for? How long was that process?
I think I nailed it in 6 months.
Okay.
Right. So it did need some runway. In that time, I was still like DMing people and DMing segments and trying to figure out, because I had to drive some short-term sales as well. So, you're balancing the tension between where you're trying to go to and, the commercial realities of today. it took us exactly 1 year. I remember having a board meeting in the year after founding it. It took us 1 year to get 100 customers. So that was the end of 2017. 2017 to 18, that actually was a really tough growth year. Actually, we again kind of struggled to really find the marketing message that worked.
Yeah.
I wasn't as good as I am now related to marketing.
Yeah.
And I dropped the ball there. But from 2018, so probably landed with about 300 customers at the end of 2018.
Okay.
But from 2018 to the end of 2019, we had landed our first 1,000. So, it started because we'd figured out marketing.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. So now we understood. So in the early days, we understood our ICP through that real scientific customer discovery process to a point where we could get repeatable sales motion. In 2017, I started hiring the junior sales folk, which also was a reason why we didn't scale as quickly, because
they were junior.
They were junior. Should have grown up a little bit quicker. And I also underappreciated, as I do now, the impact of brand on marketing, right? As I said, I was in such a head of doing email, demo, close a deal. And that was basically all the marketing that I did. And then from 2018, I recognized that, no, we're going to level this one up. So that's when we really dialed into basically become a marketing-led business more than anything. And then growth started compounding. And then, as you see, from 1,000 customers to 30,000 in the space of 3 years, you can see the compounding effects of we've nailed our ICP, nailed our messaging, but now we've nailed the way to tell it to the market at scale.
Right.
And have the team to deliver upon all of that. So,
and it sounds like the biggest difference, really, as I'm kind of listening to it, was quite interesting, is the more you invested, or the braver you guys got with the bigger decisions on the investment, the faster the growth eventually started to come in. Would you say that was correct, after the initial hires that were not perhaps the right ones, trying to do it all yourself? Actually, when you relinquished and was like, right, okay, let's get more people in and let's hire well, that seems like there's the fastest growth in that period.
When I got out of my own way, I think what happened is I was very good. I'm very proud of what I did to get the thing rocking and rolling and started. But I should have moved out my way quicker, and not thought that I'll be the one. I'm the captain of the ship. I'm going to lead it from the front. Antiquated mentality. We'll not do that again. So there's my lesson to anyone listening. Empower others more than you.
And when we think about the product, right, so it's really interesting. Obviously, the founder initially had an agency, so probably had that almost internal insight of what it is like waiting for feedback from customers. So was able to create a product based on a need. As the business grew and as the product developed, what did you do that allowed you guys to cut through in such a crowded market to the scale that you did, so much so that you got bought by obviously a huge company like Adobe? What do you think it was that ContentCal was doing so well? Because you would have had that initial feedback around, it does this well, but it's still not doing this. So what did you have to change?
All of that rich insight that we gather from every single customer interaction, whether it's customer service, whether it's sales, document it all into this central repository. And that central repository became the richest source of truth of what we'll do, what the market's feeling, what the tensions are, where the frustration points are. So we were so drenched in what the market was saying. And that meant that what we were doing for the product, we were starting to get ahead of the curve, right? Because whereas a customer would ask us to ship, feature X, we need something like this. When you start to look at it through a bigger picture, well, you've asked for feature X, but actually, if we think about it like this, we can build you a whole module which will address feature X, Y, and Z, right? So And a lot of organizations, and Hootsuite were guilty of this too, whereby they were just adding features and modules to their product, and it was adding to complexity.
Right.
Because we were thinking about this from a more holistic perspective, understanding like deep customer empathy, we could engineer a product that actually made a lot more sense. And it was always delightful for people because our UI was the best, like no doubt about it. It was the simplest to use, most delightful product to use. And yeah, that made a difference. But of course, that in itself isn't going to help the world know about it. And that's what marketing is to do. So it would need another podcast to go into all of this. And I spend most of the podcast talking about marketing. And that is really my specialist subject. But simply put, the thing that we did is celebrate both the industry and our customers at scale, and empower others to tell our story. And very early, and I say this all the time, is that most, especially B2B businesses that we were, think that social media is about what we say and what we put on our feeds. Did not care about that. I was like, we'll just put out whatever. But the bit that we cared about is like social media is what other people say about you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where the power is. Like, we all fixate on like, oh, what should we do today? How do we go viral? I do not care about what we're putting on our company pages. I care about how do we empower who controls the influence in our space? How do we empower them to talk about us? So that meant doing a whole range of things, which is one, we worked with every single social media management community that we could find, whether that's Reddit, whether that was Facebook groups, whether it's Substack, whatever. Every one of those, I would build a relationship. That was basically my next level of like sales, convincing and helping others that were influential in the space to see the value of our mission and what we were building. Because the power of influence and word of mouth is the most defensible go-to-market you will ever have. This got even more important because a huge amount of our investment was going into Google ads. We started spending about 10 grand a month on Google ads with fantastic conversion. Great. But what we forgot, and I only learned through experience, is that we fundamentally misunderstood demand generation and demand capture. We thought that 10 grand could scale 10x. So we were spending 100 grand a month on Google ads after our latest funding round, and the unit economics fell apart because many people think that it scales linearly. You know, you say, okay, it's working at 10 grand, but that's
so then it was 10x, yeah.
But it doesn't. At some point, the volume of people that want a social media product, you're going to saturate that. So you will capture the existing demand, but you're not creating new demand. And that's where, so ads is great at capturing, but you're not creating. So to create new demand, we need to go where the influence is, which means building relationships with the people that can have the most trusted voices in those spaces. Like I said, whether it's Facebook groups, whether it's on Reddit, all of those corners of the internet where people talk about your product. So I spent a huge amount of time building those relationships, because now we've got like the sales function rocking and rolling. The way I saw my role is like, how do I 10x Andy? You know, I'm a passionate guy that cares about this kind of stuff. How do I leverage sales at scale? And I basically said, I'm going to do this through all communities, basically broadly called them partners. Any way that we can scale anyone else talking about us to build a demand engine for our business, which mean building a customer affiliate program, which means, or related to, every time a customer had a positive interaction in our product, we would ping them to say, oh, if you wouldn't mind doing a review, if you do a review, we'll give you a free month off as well. We'll refund your last month. So then our Google reviews started exploding. So all of that was like 5 stars, same as like our Trustpilot and all that stuff. So all of this sentiment around our business started like to really support
the customer voice is just everywhere.
Yeah. So our NPS score, so net promoter score, etc., which we're tracking, was off the chart. Everyone loved us because we cared so deeply about our customer service interactions, delighting people when they came to us, having everyone wax lyrical about us. That mattered in the industry. Obviously, it took a long time to build all these things.
And I'm just going to say here, actually, Andy, so for anyone who doesn't know what a net promoter score is, I know because of where I have worked, it's the positive feeling around a business. That's right, isn't it?
Exactly.
That was really like coming through for me. So you've got all of this going on, and suddenly you realize it's not about the ads, it's about the amplification of the positive customer voice.
Beautiful.
Well, it's been a fascinating insight. And I know that, you're only at one next section of your journey now, because actually from selling the business or from the business being bought by Adobe, you're now principal product manager there. That's correct. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting for us to kind of see what that evolution has been. And as we kind of wrap up, there is one question that I would love to ask you. So you've gone from founder back to being employee again. What's bearing in mind all the benefits that come with being a founder, although all the hard bits too, what's been the biggest adjustment or transition for you, would you say?
Lack of ownership.
Yeah.
Hard. Yeah, it's when you have been so self-reliant for so many years, it's very hard to go to a place where you don't really have, even there's some notional ownership. It's not the same as like, oh, I'm going to move these things on my chessboard and I'm going to see an immediate result. It's more like, I'll shuffle things around and then get some others to do it and get some in. And it, whilst it's an incredible company to work for, I'm learned a ton. Hence, I've still been here 3 years after acquisition, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely trade that freedom and that ownership and that, oh, I love that feeling of responsibility where it's like, Andy, fix this. Like, how we're in a pickle here. How do we resolve it? And as much as I said, sometimes that's been my limiting belief.
Yeah.
Like, stop me from hiring, etc. But it's still the thing where I'm like, when the proverbial hits the fan, when you're like, I'm stepping up, and I miss that feeling of like, it's on me to make it work and make this happen, whether it's getting our first customer or it's closing that deal on the call with Adobe. I miss that sense of like, if I do this is massively significant. And that's why I end up having to, but I feel like I need to write another book. I need to build my Substack audience and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it gives you the time. You have the time to be able to do all of those things. And as I remember you saying, and as I quoted at the very beginning, it's been a dream, so for you to have been able to have those experiences, and like, I feel like I've just been on a journey with you over this last hour as we've been talking. So I really appreciate all that you're sharing. Right. Couple of questions to wrap up. I've got my standard ones that I ask, but I actually would like to ask you one other question, which is, if there is a dream business that you wish you had founded or invested in, what would it have been?
Coinbase.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why Coinbase.
Well, they are one of the examples of seeing where the puck is going. Saying skate where the puck's going.
Yeah.
When did they found? 2016, I think. I could have potentially invested early in them. In fact, again, narrow-mindedness, even like, I'm sure everyone's got this story. In 2016, I put in like a few £100 into Bitcoin using Coinbase, and it just went crazy. And then I got excited because I was like, oh wow, that couple of £100 has turned into a few grand. I'll take that out. Yeah, idiot.
That's definitely what I would have done as well, by the way. Yeah,
exactly. It's what it is. But like, Coinbase is just a phenomenal business. Amidst all of this regulatory scrutiny and where crypto has gone over the last 10 years or so, they've been that constant force where they've managed to navigate this in one very accessible way for users, but also navigating a very complex regulatory environment, also without stealing a whole bunch of someone's money as well. So they've actually done this in a nice way, like the other crypto exchanges. So yes, would have been Coinbase.
Great example. And then our final questions: what are you watching, listening to, and reading right now?
So don't watch a great deal of TV, if I'm honest. So I consume a huge amount of podcasts. Particularly, my biggest recommendation is a podcast called Lenny's Podcast, which is about product and growth. They had the co-founder of Anthropic on yesterday. So because understanding AI, I'm I'm doing a huge amount of AI stuff at Adobe, right? So understanding AI deeply is like, it feels so fundamental to the future of humanity, which sounds a bit scary saying that, but I recommend that podcast, especially where for going not surface level on AI, but also not to a point where it's like too deep where the layman couldn't understand.
Okay, sounds good recommendation.
And from a book perspective, I'm a motor racing nerd, so I'm reading The Business of Formula One. So that is a fascinating example of how to create a global media brand. It's what's now the most valuable sports franchise in the world, and it's basically appeared out of essentially nowhere. Started as like a cottage industry in a bunch of garages, and now it's the world's biggest, the world's biggest sports media brand. Insane. So fascinating read.
Amazing. It's been incredible speaking to you, Andy. Thank you so much for all that you've shared.
It's been a wonderful podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Don't Work Harder. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share. This show has been brought to you by Atomic, the home of epic business growth. Head to our website at atomic.site to hear more about our business programs and epic events.